You're watching The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. In a diplomatic breakthrough, 5 of the Indian sailors on board an Israeli-linked vessel seized by Tehran have been released and have departed from Iran. Australia has made it tougher for international students to get visas. It has increased the amount of money a student must have as savings to enter the country. Effective today, students will have to show they have at least 16,29,000 rupees to qualify for a visa. After US President Joe Biden's warning to Israel, Mr. Netanyahu has said that Israel can stand alone if it has to. This as Israeli warplanes struck Gaza's crowded southern city of Rafah. A survey in the UK of hundreds of pharmacists has found that patients' health is being put at risk by record drug shortages in England. Britain's opposition Labour Party has bagged its largest polling lead over the governing Tories since Liz Truss was Prime Minister. A new YouGov poll for The Times sees Labour enjoying a 30-point lead over the Conservatives. Well, our big focus in a diplomatic breakthrough. 5 of the Indian sailors on board an Israeli-linked vessel seized by Tehran have been released and have departed from Iran. This is what the Indian embassy in Iran has confirmed. In fact, the Indian embassy, while sharing details of their release, they thanked the Iranian authorities for their close coordination with the embassy as well as the Indian consulate. It may be recalled that on the 12th of April, MSC Aries was seized by Iranian authorities, and amongst the crew on board, 17 of the 25 sailors were from India. My colleague Mohammad Ghazali has been tracking the latest updates for us. He joins us live at the moment. Ghazali, 5 more Indian sailors have been released and are heading home, but 11 Indian sailors remain in Iran?
Well, yes, and it's a major diplomatic breakthrough of Indian officials who were in touch with the Iranian authorities. And even yesterday, the MEA spokesperson had said that perhaps there are some contractual obligations of the company with their sailors who are stuck there in Iran. And as everyone gets it cleared, then only the Iranian authorities will be able to release them, or these people will be managed to go back home. And besides 16 Indian sailors, there were sailors from the crew members from other nationalities who are also there on the same vessel. There were Estonians, there were Russians, there were Pakistanis. And finally, 5 more Indian sailors have been, or the crew members of this vessel have been released from Iran. And this certainly shows the kind of relationship Indian authorities enjoy with their Iranian counterpart. And furthermore, the rest of the 11 crew members from India who are still there, the authorities are claiming that perhaps in the coming days, they will also be able to get back home safely.
As always, Ghazali, thank you so much for joining us with the latest update. In other crucial news, Australia has made it tougher for international students to get visas. It has increased the amount of money a student must have as savings in order to actually enter Australia. The required amount will now be 75% of the national minimum wage. Effective today, as in 10th of May, students will have to show they have at least 16,29,964 rupees to qualify for a visa. That's nearly 16,30,000 rupees. The government is tightening visa rules after reports of lots of people moving to Australia since the COVID-19 restrictions were actually lifted back in 2022. But this has caused problems like a shortage of rental homes. Well, to help us understand how these rules impact Indian students, we have with us immigration expert Rohit Sharma. Thanks so much, Rohit, for joining us. You know, the latest Home Affairs data in Australia shows that visas granted to Indian students actually fell by 48% if we're talking about December 2022 and between December 2023. Now that Australia has tougher visa conditions, How likely is this to discourage Indian students from considering Australia as an option to pursue higher studies?
Yeah, very good morning to start with, and thank you for calling me on this show. As regard this dip in the number, that obviously is expected, when you are raising the bar, not only on the fund requirement that are required to be shown, but also they have put restrictions on IELTS requirements as well, like they have raised the bar in that side as well. Having said so, it is not just specific to Indian students. The Australian government is being pretty concerned about the rising rentals, and at the same time,
Yes.
the number of students that actually have increased in the last 1 year or so, record 650,000. In fact, immigrants actually are being increased in the last year until February 29th itself. So yes, a matter of concern for students, because as and when they are going to raise the bar, there will always be a filter that certain students will not be able to qualify.
Yes, but this is the second time in 7 months that the amount of savings has been increased, following a previous hike in October, if I'm not wrong. Meanwhile, many offshore students are experiencing visa refusals, while others lots of students complain that they're scared to travel back home because they fear that their visas will be cancelled upon their return to Australia.
So to start with, as far as you are meeting the requirements of the study visa, whatever the enhanced requirements they are, so if you are meeting them, it's not that they are refusing the applications just like that. So, and it is not also that whatever laws that they are introducing now, they are implementing on the already applied applicants. So student visa refusal is not happening because of any increase in the bar. If you are meeting the credentials, you can still apply and can actually qualify for the process.
Right.
And as regard, the concern that if you are staying in Australia and during your breaks or so, if you want to come back, as far as you are meeting the visa regulations, they are not going to stop you from that. That's for sure.
We're also hearing of an anticipated hike in student visa fees in the May budget. Surely that's likely to impact the share of international students and perhaps decrease it further, right?
Yeah, that is there. They are obviously tightening up the screw. Having said so, also one has to understand that Australia, when it comes to international student export, it is relying so much on, this is one of the biggest industry, in fact, almost quantum at USD 50 billions. So it's not that Australia is shutting the door on students internationally. It is just that they are tightening up a bit to ensure that they are able to uphold the integrity of their education sector as well. Because all said and done, there are many students also who actually take this option of study to land in those countries, go for temporary jobs there, and eventually make it their home rather than having an objective to study. So the students who actually want to study in Australia, they shouldn't be, fearing about it. They should simply go by as per the regulatory requirements are there and can actually apply and go by. Yes, you pay more if you are actually wanting to study in Australia. That entire idea is to also ensure the student is not falling into financial distress once they're in Australia. There are so many ways they want the students not to be exploited as well. They are also looking at the quality, and more important, this I'm saying, they're looking at the genuine intent of a student to go study and live in Australia. They're not shutting the door at all.
In fact, the Home Affairs Minister there has said that the government recognizes that change is hard, but migration is too high, and their focus is actually to bring it to sustainable levels. Thank you so much, Rohit, for joining us on The World 24/7.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Meanwhile, Indian students in the United States are struggling to land jobs and even internships this summer amid a slowdown in job growth in the world's largest economy. Many students, including those from elite Ivy League universities, have failed to get an internship offer so far, which is considered crucial to gain on-job experience before stepping into the highly competitive job market. But why is it that after investing so much time and money, Indian students find it difficult to find employment in the US, in the UK, while they're abroad? Well, as experts point out, a major reason is that the global economic slowdown has severely hit entry-level job opportunities. What has made matters worse, many of them claim, is that an unwritten mandate of sorts from the government, at least as far as the US is concerned, ahead of the presidential election to several companies, the main message is to hire locals first. Also, high inflation, escalating cost of living, local unemployment and sponsorship problems have further added to the woes of Indian students graduating in the US this year. Modern day jobs, by the way, Modern day job hunters especially, they take 5 months on an average to land a position in the US. This is what a new research by the recruitment agency Randstad US claims. But why is this? Well, to help us understand the ground reality, we have with us Soundarya Balasubramani, author and the founder of The Curious Maverick. Thank you so much, Soundarya, for joining us live from San Francisco. What do you think are some causes for Indian international students struggling to land internships and jobs abroad, especially in the US? We are well aware that one big issue with the US-based positions specifically is the H-1B visa that companies need to sponsor.
I think because the job market has been bad for the last 2 years, it's been a struggle not just for Indian students, but for any student, really. But for any international student, the struggle multiplies and exemplifies because you now have to be sponsored by the employer. And being sponsored means that the employer has to be willing to go a few extra steps to hire you in terms of putting your name in the H-1B lottery, which costs them several $1,000s, or to sponsor your OPT or STEM OPT. So I feel like that's what's causing this extra hurdle that students have to pass through. And I don't think that's specific to Indian students, but any international student has to go through the same problem.
Students studying abroad, international students, even in top US colleges, NYU Stern, UC Berkeley, University of Pennsylvania, they are struggling. But do you think the global economic slowdown, the crisis within the job market has affected job opportunities for international students?
Yes, I have probably spoken to dozens of, 30, 40 students in the last year or so. And it's unanimously the same message that I've heard is that the job market has been pretty bad for them, and very few of them have been able to find an internship or a job. And many of them had an internship which got revoked later on, or a job that got rescinded later on. And so I definitely think it's had an impact. I am hearing lately that the things are starting to get better and that more jobs are opening up. At least from 3 different friends I heard this. But yeah, overall it has been pretty impactful for everyone.
But we're hearing that even students in science, tech, engineering and math, STEM fields who were previously in high demand are also facing challenges. But just picking up on what you said, you mentioned there's a positive change towards people having more access to job opportunities. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, I think the reason there was, first of all, a layoff is because during the pandemic, a lot of tech companies overhired people because they needed people immediately, perhaps, or because they were making a lot more money. And so after the pandemic ended, when they realized that there wasn't as much money coming in anymore, they had to lay off people. And I definitely think there is a cycle that's happening here, in terms of 2-3 years of a boom, and then there's 2 years of a bust, and then there's, once again, things are picking up right now. And so that could be just it, but I don't know more than that.
Right. But Soundarya, the desire to pursue higher education overseas, it seems to have resonated with Indian students for a while now. But are you seeing students heading back home to India, or do you think they're still trying to make it abroad?
I definitely think that students are returning back to their home country, and that is just because there is no other choice, really. So there is a few immigration options that a student can pursue when, let's say, they graduate, they get 90 days of unemployment. They can volunteer on their OPT potentially to stop that unemployment clock. But eventually, when they have to get a STEM OPT or an H-1B, they do need a verified letter from a paying employer. And so if they're unable to get that and they cross their unemployment days, there's only a few options for them. For example, they could go back to school and do another degree. Some students pursue something called a day 1 CPT, which, that's something that I personally wouldn't recommend just because it can be very risky for students. And besides that, there's not really many options they can pursue. So they have to return back to their home country at that point. And I've met people who, at least 3 people, who are ready to go back to their home country in the last few weeks.
Well, thank you so much, Soundarya Balasubramani, for joining us on The World 24/7 with your insight. In other crucial news, Benjamin Netanyahu has said Israel can stand alone after the US warned it could halt arms shipments if the Israeli Prime Minister ordered a full-scale invasion of Rafah in Gaza. Israeli warplanes struck Gaza's Rafah after the US warning, and Israel has already defied international objections by sending in tanks and conducting what it called targeted raids in the east of Rafah. The city, it says, is home to Hamas's last remaining battalions. The United States warning came after Biden's administration actually paused delivery last week of 1,800 907-kilo bombs and 1,700 500-pound bombs as Israel appeared ready to attack Rafah.
היום אנחנו הרבה יותר חזקים. אנחנו יותר חזקים, אנחנו נחושים, ואנחנו מאוחדים כדי להביס את אויבינו, את מבקשי נפשנו. אם נצטרך לעמוד לבד, נעמוד לבד. אמרתי כבר שאם צריך נילחם בציפורניים, אבל יש לנו הרבה יותר מאשר ציפורניים. ובאותן תעצומות נפש, בעזרת השם, יחד ננצח.
Let's turn our attention now to the United Kingdom. Well, people in England are having to play pharmacy bingo, going from shop to shop to actually find stocks as medicine shortages are worsening. Drug shortages in England are now at such critical levels that patients are at risk of immediate harm and even death. This is what pharmacists are warning. Hundreds of different drugs have become hard or impossible to obtain, according to Community Pharmacy England, which published a latest report. And in recent months, the UK has seen key medicines for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, ADHD, and epilepsy become unavailable. In fact, last year, the UK saw shortages of HRT, adrenalines, and antibiotics as well. Now, Community Pharmacy England, which represents England's 10,500 community pharmacies, revealed in its latest report that 79% of pharmacy staff said that medicine shortages were actually putting patient health at risk, while 99% of pharmacy workers found a drug was unavailable at least weekly, and 72% encountered that entire issue several times in a single day. And meanwhile, so much for the Rishi Sunak recovery. Britain's opposition Labour Party bagged its largest polling lead over the governing Tories since Liz Truss was Prime Minister. A new YouGov poll for The Times sees Labour enjoying a 30-point lead over the Conservatives, and Keir Starmer's party now sits on 48% support to the Tories' 18%. That's the biggest gulf for Prime Minister Sunak since he actually entered office in October 2022 after Truss's chaotic 49-day tenure in 10 Downing Street.
Because the big story.
Well, as always, news and updates continue. We're taking a quick break for now. Welcome back. A quick update from the US for you. Donald Trump's lawyers sought to show inconsistencies in porn star Stormy Daniels' various tellings of a 2006 sexual encounter she said she had with Trump, part of an effort to undermine his credibility as a witness in the first criminal trial of a sitting or former US president. Now, Stormy Daniels' unflattering account of a sexual encounter with Trump in a hotel suite while he was married to his wife Melania riveted jurors and reminded US voters of some of the more lurid aspects of his 2017 to 2021 presidency as he campaigns to win back the White House this year. We have reactions from Donald Trump and Rick Scott, followed by Sally Peterson's report from New York. Listen in.
Here we sit after 2.5 weeks, and I think you'll see some very revealing things today, and I want to thank my lawyers. They've done a very good job, but I'd rather thank them after it's over.
This can't continue. What's happening to this president is wrong. We're watching all over the country. We're watching all these cases that are going after somebody simply because he's a political opponent of Joe Biden.
Stormy Daniels' dramatic and at times detailed and graphic testimony came to an end on Thursday. The pornography star talked the jury through the relationship she alleges to have had with Donald Trump, which began, she says, in 2006 when they met at a golf tournament in Lake Tahoe. She claims to have been invited back to his hotel suite and, after speaking to her publicist, decided to go after she was told it would be a great story either way. She arrived at his suite to find him dressed in his silk or satin pajamas. She says they discussed her career, the pornography industry, and even discussed going into business together. Daniels claims she went into the bathroom, and when she came out, Trump was lying on his bed wearing only his underwear. She claims that a sexual encounter between the pair then took place. Donald Trump has always denied any sexual relationship between them. Now, when it was their opportunity to cross-examine the witness, Trump's team tried their best to undermine her credibility and her memory. They made out that she had really only told this story in pursuit of profit and to try and boost her own image and status within her field. They claim that her story has changed since she told it to interviews and in a book years ago, and tried to basically undermine her credibility as someone in this case. She stood by her story, though, claiming that, if anything, speaking out has actually made her worse off, not better. Daniels claims she's had to move homes because of threats to her safety. She said she's been threatened on social media, and she said she's had to hire security in order to keep herself and her family safe. Now, a reminder of this case more widely, this trial is looking at a payment allegedly paid to Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 presidential election to keep quiet about the alleged affair. That payment of $130,000 was made by Trump's lawyer and fixer at the time, Michael Cohen. Trump is then accused of paying back that money to Cohen and filing it as a legal expense. The prosecution claims that that is, in fact, illegal. Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, and if he's found guilty, he could face jail time. He is, of course, running to be the president of the United States once again, and is frustrated to be spending time inside the courtroom here and not out on the campaign trail. Sally Patterson, NDTV, New York.
Well, thank you for investing your time in watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest developments for you. Do stay tuned.